Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and I just hit my season high elo of 3054 in the Open Great League with a truly ridiculous team. Now today, honestly, I was just looking to have some fun in the Open Great League, so I threw together a team featuring Morgrem, Poltergeist Dusclops, and Melmetal. Now this is an objectively terrible team. There are so many core breakers, but I guess sometimes today is just your day, and I ended up going super positive with the team to make it to my season high of elo. Now should you try this team? Absolutely not, but I felt like the games were fun, so I still did want to share them. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1, we pick up a pretty decent lead, Morgrem into Shadow Slash. Now Morgrem's Sucker Punches are going to be exceedingly oppressive in this matchup. Sandslash will have a pacing advantage, but ideally, I would love to try and get as much pressure onto the Sandslash as possible, because I know that Sandslash very often has a Pokemon like Jelly in the back that Morgrem would obviously do amazingly into. I'm going to overfarm quite a bit, play to the CMP tie, Foul Play to their second Ice Punch. It looks like I should actually be able to get that Sucker Punch down here. My opponent's going to pivot out, they send in a Shadow Feraligatr, and they are so weak to Morgrem. I'm going to build up to the Play Rough, bait with a Foul Play, I'm able to get the shield, and now I send in Melmetal. At this point, I feel like I'm in a very good position in this game. The one scenario where I could see myself losing is if I knock out my opponent with Dynamic Punch and then Jellicent gets a huge reverse farm. So I actually go for an Undercharge on Dynamic Punch, leaving the Feraligatr at very low HP. Now, they can be the ones to knock me out, and I'm going to get the farm. But they undercharge as well, but they don't send in a Jellicent, they send in Sandslash. So maybe I'm mistaken, maybe it's not going to be a Jellicent in the back. Either way, I can send in the Dusclops and take advantage of the fact that Dusclops, even if it's not a particularly strong Pokemon, is extremely bulky. But guess what? It's Jellicent in the back, and it's Poltergeist time. Should you run Poltergeist on Dusclops? Probably not, but it is an exceedingly funny move. Poltergeist one-shots the Jellicent, Dusclops farms down, and that's a good game. Hopping into game number 2, we pick up a dominant lead win, Morgrem into Shadow Malamar. Shadow Malamar can hit for neutral damage with superpower, but the Psywaves are double resisted, so Morgrem isn't such a dominant matchup. Morgrem takes quite a bit of damage, my opponent save switches into Licky, and I'm able to bank energy and send in Melmetal. As long as Licky is on the standard moveset, which is Shadow Ball, Melmetal should be a very convincing answer. My opponent does have a ton of energy. I have to hope they're not on Earthquake here, but luckily just going to be the Shadow Ball. So I tank the Shadow Ball, fire off Double Iron Bash, and Double Iron Bash should be enough to secure the knockout. Double Iron Bash lands, Licky is going to fall, and back in comes the Shadow Malamar. I try and make it to Dynamic Punch, but I'm not quite able to get there, and I decide that I will actually try and preserve the Melmetal. I have a ton of energy on the Melmetal, and hopefully I can make life uncomfortable for them. In the back, my opponent reveals they have Tinkaton as their final Pokemon, and after landing Dynamic Punch, now it's time to send in the Dusclops. Now, Dusclops normally doesn't really do any damage. Dusclops with Shadow Punch does basically nothing neutrally, but that's one of the reasons why I'm running Poltergeist. It's for the surprise nuke. So I farm up, go for the Poltergeist, it connects, Tinkaton gets KO'd, and this game is over. Back in comes the Shadow Malamar, I'm able to make the Ice Punch. This will finally force away the first Protect Shield of the match for my opponent, but I can pivot into Morgrem, fire off the Foul Play, and this will guarantee the win. My opponent can never Psywave down the Morgrem, and that's going to be the thing that loses them the game, because they're forced to throw energy here, and once they do, then I should always be able to make a move on Melmetal and take home the win. I believe Melmetal is only one off the Double Iron Bash, so I can bring in the Melmetal, shield up as they go for the Foul Play, click on that Double Iron Bash, and we're going to be able to take the win. Obviously a very favorable team comp for me here, but man, Morgrem was able to put in some very nice work. We move to the next match, Morgrem into Corsola, and Morgrem is absolutely feasting. My opponent save switches into a Gastrodon, and this is where things could get a little bit tricky. I don't have a particularly strong answer to Gastrodon on the team. I fire off the Foul Play, get a shield, and then I'm just going to try to overfarm and go for a catch on a Dusclops. I'm hoping my opponent went for the Body Slam bait here. Even if they did go for the Earth Power, I'd be okay, but they did go for the Body Slam bait, and I'm able to catch the double resisted move. That works out incredibly well for me. They can now go for the Earth Power, but I don't really care. I'm going to farm up. Oh, they try for a catch. Switch timer's up, and they're able to send in the Wigglytuff. Unfortunately, I believe I'm going to have to fire off back-to-back Ice Punches here just to burn the switch timer, but then I should be able to get Melmetal on the field. Melmetal is obviously going to do an amazing job at shutting down Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff forced to fire off energy right away, as otherwise I would just make the Double Iron Bash and they were already in range. Now I can look to overfarm massively, fire off the Double Iron Bash on the CMP tie, and even though my attack is at -1, I believe I can take the knockout here. Double Iron Bash lands, that is going to be the end of Wigglytuff, and back in comes the Corsola. While I do have pretty good alignment in this game, I don't really want to stay in a matchup while I'm very heavily debuffed, so I'm going to look to bank energy and then pivot into the Dusclops. This way, my energy will be at full power later in the game on the Melmetal, and even though giving up Switch might not be the most advisable play into a Gastrodon Wigglytuff Corsola team, I still feel like that Melmetal energy, now that I've reset the debuff, is basically just unbeatable. So I'm just going to wait down the timer, and when it hits 0, it's time to bring back in the Morgrem. Morgrem gets the Fire Off Foul Play at the Gastrodon. Gastrodon did save a little bit of energy here, and now I can pivot into the Melmetal and go for the CMP Sack Swap. This Dynamic Punch will erase Gastrodon from the field of play, and as Corsola hits the field, there's just simply no way out for my opponent. They have no way of beating the Morgrem, but as it turns out, I don't even think I'm going to need the Morgrem, because we're actually able to survive one more Astonish with fractional HP remaining, make it to another Double Iron Bash, KO the Corsola, and take the win. We move to the next game, leading Morgrem into Shadow Golurk. Now there's a Pokemon I haven't seen in quite some time. My opponent save switches into Shadow Celio, and I get to respond with the Melmetal. Now, I did notice there was a trainer that made it to Legend rank with a Shadow Golurk Celio Tinkaton team some days ago. So the fact that I'm seeing Shadow Golurk and Celio makes me think it could be a Tinkaton third. And if that's the case, then honestly, I don't even necessarily need switch advantage. As long as I can just get a shield advantage or energy lead on my Dusclops should just be able to Poltergeist everything. And my opponent is double shielding. They are really trying to hard sell out for switch advantage. Body Slam will take the knockout, and I'm going to bring back in the Morgrem. If it's Tinkaton, then my Morgrem doesn't really have a lot of play in the back, so I may as well just end up no-shielding the Surf, waiting the turn, and then under-tapping the Foul Play. Foul Play will secure the KO, and then I'm just going to pivot into the Dusclops. My opponent does bring in the Golurk. I send in the Dusclops, but I'm down a turn. My opponent banks energy, and there it is. In comes the Tinkaton. Well, it's time. We go for the Poltergeist, but it doesn't even do 3/4 of their health. Tinkaton is just way too bulky. If I get baited here, things could get a little bit difficult. I put up the shield, but thank goodness they ended up full sending the Gigaton Hammer. I'm just going to keep farming. This, I believe, is not enough for a Gigaton. It should only be enough for a Bulldoze. So I can survive the Bulldoze. Now I can fire off the Ice Punch. Ice Punch would probably take the win against the Golurk. But, you know what? Let's see if we can land a Poltergeist anyway. So, I put up the shield as they go for the Shadow Punch. I believe I'm only 1 hex away. We get to the Poltergeist, and we're landing 2 Poltergeists in 1 game. Poltergeist KOs that Shadow Golurk. Back in comes the Tinkaton just to get hexed down, and that's going to be a win. Morgrem into Shadow Kanto Ninetales in the next match. I believe this is not an amazing matchup for Morgrem. I do have a pretty good Morgrem, but I believe I do get Embered down in the 2s after they land a Weather Ball. Weather Ball does land, that does do quite a lot of damage, but my opponent's going to pivot out and save switch into Hisuian Electrode. Hisuian Electrode is an incredibly scary Pokemon to encounter. I do hit for super effective with Ice Punch, but Ice Punch is never going to be taking the knockout. So I decide that after I try and reach for the Ice Punch and they fire off another move, I'm actually going to go instead for the Poltergeist, as Poltergeist would definitely take the knockout here, and Ice Punch I don't think would do enough. So I go for the Poltergeist, but they respect it, they put up the shield, and I might be in shambles. However, my opponent doesn't end up CMP tying there, letting me get an Ice Punch, and Ice Punch will allow me to pressure away the final shield. So at the very least, I have gotten all shields down, and I do have some energy stored on the Morgrem. So Energy Ball will take the KO, back in comes the Morgrem, and I'm able to win charge stack priority over the Electrode. Electrode does get knocked out by the Foul Play, and in the back, my opponent has Jumpluff. I pivot into Melmetal, back in comes the Kanto Ninetales, and I really just have to hope that 4 Thunder Shocks plus Dynamic Punch will take the KO. So I farm up, playing to the CMP tie. If this doesn't KO, I have lost this game. Dynamic Punch into the Ninetales, barely takes the knockout, and I believe with that, we should be able to take home the win. Even though I've already taken a lot of damage on my Melmetal from the Embers, Double Iron Bash will still add up, and my opponent can never one-shot me here. Even if they do go for the Acrobatics, it would fail to take the knockout. So instead, they're just going to try for Double Energy Ball. I build up to the back-to-back Double Iron Bashes. Another Double Iron Bash will connect, putting them pretty low, and I pivot out and send in the Morgrem. Morgrem will be able to get some chip damage onto this Jumpluff, and that should firmly put it into Double Iron Bash range. The threat of a farm down is going to force out energy. Sucker Punch is very oppressive, and I should have the Double Iron Bash loaded. Oh, it turns out I didn't have the Double Iron Bash loaded there. I thought I did on the Melmetal, but luckily, one more Thunder Shock, we get the Double Iron Bash, and we get the win. We move to the next game, picking up a very spicy lead Morgrem into Shadow Milotic. Now, Shadow Milotic is a very, very scary Pokemon. It is incredibly oppressive with a combination of Waterfall, Aqua Tail, and Wrap. I get to strike first with the foul play, and then I'm going to throw one Sucker Punch and go for the catch and sneak onto Dusclops. Dusclops up energy I'm hoping will be pretty good into their back line, and we end up catching the double resisted wrap. But unfortunately our happiness is short-lived as out comes Licky, and this right here is why Dusclops is not a meta-relevant Pokemon. Dusclops is just absolutely helpless into Licky. Add to that the fact that I'm at -1 defense, and I can't even survive a Shadow Ball like I normally could. The one thing I have going for me is because I got the catch, the switch timers are misaligned, so I can fire off the Ice Punch, my clock's up, and I can send in Melmetal. Melmetal will instantly be greeted with the Shadow Ball. This is going to do a sizable amount of damage onto Licky, and my opponent reveals their final Pokemon to the back is Tinkaton. Somehow, despite the fact that our Dusclops got answered by a Licky, I feel like I'm not out of this game yet. Dynamic Punch will do really nice damage onto the Tinkaton, and I believe Tinkaton will probably go for Gigaton. So I put up the shield, they do go for the Gigaton Hammer. Even though Gigaton is resisted there, it would have done more damage overall. So I fire off Double Iron Bash. That does not quite take the knockout, and my opponent is going to be hit now with Double Iron Bash number 2. This Double Iron Bash will secure the KO, and Tinkaton has finally been removed from the field. Back in comes Shadow Milotic. They're forced to throw energy. I was very close to a Dynamic Punch. Aqua Tail will take the knockout, and I bring back in the Dusclops. My opponent pivots out into Licky. I send in the Morgrem, and I'm realizing I think I've won this game. Morgrem should be able to get the final shield here with the foul play. The Sucker Punches are going to put them into Ice Punch range, and I have the Ice Punch banked on the Dusclops. Licky goes for the Body Slam. They go for a slight undercharge there. That sets up the farm down. I set in the Dusclops, click the Ice Punch, and this is when I learned that Dusclops loses charge stack priority to Licky. Honestly, I haven't played Dusclops in quite some time. I thought it would be a pretty close CMP time, and maybe there's a chance that I win it, but unfortunately, there is not. Very well played game there to my opponent, as unfortunately we do take the loss. We pick up a decent lead in the next match, leading Morgrem into Shadow Annihilape. Now, Morgrem should win the ones into Annihilape because Morgrem should win charge stack priority unless your opponent's running a very high attack Annihilape. They fire off the Rage Fist, I put up the shield, and they make a very nice catch as they send in Licky. The most common core pairing with Counter Annihilape that I feel like I see nowadays is Counter Annihilape plus Carbink. So I'm able to get a nice Body Slam catch out of the Melmetal, but if my opponent's able to bait out the Melmetal and then farm it down with Annihilape, then there's a very real chance that I get swept by the Bank. So I think I'm actually going to have to make kind of a crazy play here. I'm calling out that they have Carbink in the back, and I'm double shielding the Melmetal. I'm going to overfarm massively, Dynamic Punch will take the KO, and I will have access to a Double Iron Bash to throw at Annihilape when it hits the field. This is going to burn my switch timer, and then I can pivot out and try and lure out the Carbink if it's back there. So I bring in the Morgrem, my opponent stays on the field with Annihilape. I guess maybe I was wrong, maybe it wasn't the Carbink. I fire off Foul Play will be shielded, Annihilape does get that full farm down, but they're on basically 1 HP. I'm going to fully weight down the timer here to try and burn as much switch clock as possible. I bring in the Dusclops in the back. What do you know? It's the Carbink, and I should be able to fire off an immediate Poltergeist and then send in the Melmetal. The fact that I weighted down the timer means that my opponent's going to be in a very rough spot. I can get Melmetal on the field. I should always be able to make the back-to-back Double Iron Bashes, and that's just going to instantly end the game. Moonblast connects. Melmetal just simply does not care. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We pick up a pretty good lead in the next match, Morgrem into Feraligatr. Or at the very least, I assume it's a pretty good lead. This is my first time really ever playing Morgrem, so I don't have a lot of experience with this Pokemon. Hydro Cannon will hit for pretty big damage out of the Morgrem, and it looks like there's a very real chance that my opponent may be able to Shadow Claw me down in the 2s. Either way, I overfarm, CMP tie with the foul play, my opponent ends up no shielding, and I'm able to win switch. In comes a Togekiss looking for a farm down, but on 1 HP, I'm able to hang on, make the play rough, and hit for big damage. I send in Dusclops, my opponent pivots out. In the back, they have a Quick Attack Diggersby, and this matchup feels like a blast from the past. Quick Attack Diggersby versus Dusclops. This was the reason why people ran Dusclops back in the day. This was before Mudshot had been rebuffed, so Quick Attack was preferred, and Dusclops had a winning matchup here. Well, Dusclops should still do well enough that I will be able to take home this win. They can fire off a bunch of Scorching Sands, but Dusclops is just incredibly bulky. My opponent makes it to Scorching Sands number 2. I'm going to no shield and then instantly undertap the Ice Punch. My opponent does get that 1 in 10 Scorching Sands debuff, but the -1 Ice Punch should still put them into dynamic range. And once they're in dynamic range, that should effectively end the game. The fact that my opponent has Quick Attack also hurts them a lot in the Melmetal matchup. They have no fast move pressure. We're able to bait with the Fire Punch, but barring an insane Dynamic Punch catch onto the Kiss, there's just really no way out. Dynamic will be shielded. Even if my opponent lands the Scorching Sands, I realize that that's not going to take the knockout. They have no fast attack pressure remaining. So I just farm up. In comes the Togekiss, and I should be able to farm up until right before the double Iron Bash plus Dynamic double up. So I farm up, decided to throw on 7 here in case for whatever reason my mental math on where Kiss's energy was at was wrong. So I farm up until 2 before that double up, and we're still able to outpace. Back in comes Diggersby, we reach Dynamic Punch, KO the Rabbit, and take the win. Hopping to the final match, we get one final time Morgrem into Shadow Kanto Ninetales. Again, a pretty rough matchup for the Morgrem, but if I'm able to take a shield advantage, that works for me. If I can get shield advantage and some good damage onto that Ninetales, then hopefully my Melmetal will be able to do well into whatever they have in the back. So I end up taking the first, over farming, firing off the foul play, and my opponent will put up the shield. The fact that their shielding is a little bit worrisome. I would have much preferred had they just let my foul play go. So now I think I'm actually going to try and play out the 2s. Now, I don't win the 2s as Morgrem, but if I can get all shields down, then maybe I can Poltergeist something with Dusclops. So I'm able to force both shields. I send in Dusclops, and they send in Shadow Malamar. If I did not have Poltergeist, all would be lost here, because my Melmetal doesn't want to see this Pokemon either. But guess what? We're rocking the Poltergeist. This is the Shadow Malamar. I charge up, going for the Poltergeist. There's the one-hit KO, and down goes Shadow Malamar. What do they have in the back? If they bring in the Ninetales, I can just hex them down. Their final Pokemon is revealed to be Jumpluff. Oh, this is actually perfect. Dusclops is popping off in the final game. Ice Punch is going to connect for big damage. I farm up 2, send in the Melmetal. Back in comes the Kanto Ninetales, and Kanto Ninetales is going to be able to connect with the Weather Ball. Weather Ball does do big damage. There's Weather Ball number 2, but this is just going to set up a big farm down for the Dusclops. If my opponent doesn't get damage registration error here, I should win the game, and they don't. They exit with the Acrobatics, but Dusclops will not get knocked out here. I don't think Ice Punch will quite take the KO. So, one final time, Dusclops. Let's go for Poltergeist. Poltergeist is only neutral damage, but it KOs the Jumpluff, and that's a good game. Man, I had a lot of fun in today's sets. I ended up playing these sets in the Competitors Cup because on whatever update they just put through for Go Battle League, the new system, it's normally performed pretty well for me. It was not performing well at all. I was starting behind by a turn pretty consistently. I wasn't really able to time charge stacks particularly well, and that's obviously a very frustrating experience, so I ended up going into Competitors Cup for today, and Competitors Cup actually was pretty enjoyable. I do want to reiterate what I said at the start, which is, this is not a team you should run if you care about your elo in any meaningful way. I honestly ended up getting some very favorable matchups today that helped me reach my season high elo. I was able to make some good plays along the way, but I definitely feel like more often than not, I was at a team comp advantage, and it just somehow ended up being a team where if I didn't know what I was running, then opponents didn't know what I was running either. But I don't think the success of this team would ever be repeatable, just because even though some of the Pokemon are like interesting anti-meta, like Melmetal or Morgrem to a certain extent, I do think that having this many like spicy / anti-meta picks on one team is usually not a recipe for long-term success. The Pokemon that are meta for a reason, and that's just because they're kind of the best. So teams like these often have very short shelf lives, or if they work well one day, then they don't end up working well the next. But it was just such a fun run, and I got to my season high elo, so I figured it was worth making a video on, because man, when in life do you get to see Morgrem, Poltergeist, Dusclops, and Melmetal teaming up to terrorize the Open Great League for one short day? Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching content like this, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated. So thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.